All right, there are quite a few new Nintendo Switch 2 updates and news stories going around online that I want to discuss with you all today, starting with one that does give us some more data that seems to indicate that Nintendo has probably had the largest console launch ever in history from a sales perspective, and this is a relatively small sample size coming out of France, but it does absolutely blow out of the water the previous record for a console at a launch. And I think with the stock levels Nintendo delivered of this thing, that's probably what we're looking at here. Past that, there is an update around the ongoing Call of Duty and Nintendo Switch 2 situation, because you might remember the agreement that Microsoft is in with Nintendo for the next 10 years, and we now have an update around Activision themselves commenting on the situation and where they're at right now. There is now new official steps if you are somebody who's experiencing some weirdness with your battery life on the Nintendo Switch, or maybe the indicator not lining up with the correct amount of battery you have left. Nintendo now has some official steps that you may want to know about if this is something that affects you. Then we also have a pretty cool comparison of load times depending on how your games are installed that I do want to highlight. There are some unfortunate reports of Joycon drift, not widespread at this point in time, but it of course remains to be seen how big of a problem this will be this generation, if one at all. But Nintendo has actually handled the issues that have popped up very easily so far, so I want to highlight that. There's an interesting tidbit of information that's been found in Mario Kart World having to do with the difficulty of the CPUs, and this theory, if it does check out, and it seems to be checking out, it would be a very interesting one. We are getting some new looks of Switch 2 versions of games that quite honestly blow out of the water the previous version on Switch 1, and you might want to know about them. And a quick, very brief update on the Legend of Zelda movie and a new launch date for it on terms of when you will be able to go see it in theaters. So we're going to unpack all of these details, but before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And I want to first kick off this conversation right over at Go Nintendo, where you can see the following article typed up that says, rumor Switch 2 to become France's biggest game hardware launch ever. Nintendo has yet to release sales data for Switch 2, which they will no doubt do any day now. While we wait for Nintendo's official press release, we have some supposed inside information from one part of the world. Thanks to Games Business Insider, Geo, and whatever's after that, we have some data that now pertains to the launch weekend of the Switch 2 in France. Now keep in mind that these numbers aren't coming from Nintendo directly, but they do come from a trusted source. With that said, here's the breakdown from France's opening weekend. Over 200,000 units sold on the first weekend, over 100 million in revenue from hardware alone. That figure climbs to 130 million whenever you add games in and accessories. 70% of sales for the Switch 2 were the Mario Kart World bundle. Roughly 3 to 5% of Switch 2 buyers didn't purchase Mario Kart World. If all this data holds up, that would make the Switch 2 the biggest hardware launch in France ever. To put that into perspective, the previous record holder was the PS5, which managed to move 107,000 units in its opening weekend. So we are talking about the claim of almost double that of the PS5 launch in France. And listen, the demand is there for the Switch 2, and what's crazy about it is that while it's not easy to find, Nintendo really did deliver a lot more day one stock of this console than we've seen with other generations when they kick off. And that's why I do tend to believe a lot of these reports that are suggesting that Nintendo has probably had the biggest console launch ever in history. You just have to do the math on the install base of the Switch of 150 million, and a lot of those people got their Switch in the first few years. So, you know, you potentially had this console for 8 years plus when Nintendo releases the follow-up to it. They're playing it safe this time, sticking to the same general idea and form factor and just improving upon it, naming it the Switch 2, nothing weird like the Wii U. Yes, I think Nintendo has a big success on their hands here, despite all of the negative press online. You got to remember that Twitter and online social media is not necessarily the general consumer at the end of the day. But you do have here, moving along, you might realize that Summer Game Fest and Xbox Game Showcase was over the weekend. There were lots of big game announcements. Switch 2, not so much in the conversation for many of those announcements. And now my personal take on this is that Nintendo is very controlling in how they like to announce games for their new platform. And while the Switch 2 logo probably could have been there on a lot of the games at Summer Game Fest and the Microsoft Game Showcase, I do believe that Nintendo, because it's the new console generation and it's just getting kicked off, they probably want to have all of these third-party ports highlighted in a Nintendo focused direct that we should be able to safely expect to take place this month in June. We may make a separate video deep diving why that is in a different day. But anyway, rest assured, lots of those games either are not for Switch 2 yet because the developers don't have dev kits, because Nintendo did only pick a handful of partners to actually get early dev kits for the Switch 2, and or it is just something that needs to be revealed from Nintendo at their showcase, not a partner showcase like Summer Game Fest or Xbox Game Showcase. Well, you have here, if you're wondering specifically about Call of Duty, rumor Microsoft and Nintendo working to bring Call of Duty to Switch 2 update. Will it answer the call? You might remember when Microsoft was trying to gobble up Activision Blizzard, the company pledged to bring Call of Duty franchise to Nintendo fans for the next 10 years. While it took some time, the deal finally went through and Microsoft completed their acquisition of Activision Blizzard. Unfortunately, we still haven't heard a peep about Call of Duty on Nintendo's side of things. Call of Duty Black Ops 7 was announced for a multitude of platforms today, but Switch or Switch 2 weren't mentioned. It was pretty baffling, as we went from thinking Call of Duty was a lock for Nintendo fans, but after that initial pledge of support, not a single detail has come out. Apparently that shouldn't be cause for concern. Kotaku is saying they've talked to people close to the matter and that those unnamed sources say that both Microsoft and Nintendo are committed to bringing Call of Duty to the Switch 2. There was no mention of the Switch and no specifics on what Call of Duty game would come to Switch 2. In other words, there's still a lot of questions about what kind of support Nintendo fans can hope for, but it seems that things are in motion behind the scenes. And then you have this updated statement. In a statement provided to GameSpot, Activision has said that they are committed to getting the franchise on Switch. Both teams are working on it. Furthermore, Activision said they will share details when ready. So where's the state of this right now? We don't know if it's going to be something like Black Ops 7 day and date launch on Nintendo Switch 2, or is Activision actually going to bring more of the Call of Duty franchise to Switch in addition to Switch 2? Because it is possible they have a number of different ports lined up for the original Switch, and maybe there's just an upgrade pack available for the Switch 2 version of those games. That is definitely a possibility. But the thing about this is it is a when, not if scenario, because that agreement that was signed, that was part of Microsoft getting the merger to go through the FTC, so it's a legal binding agreement. It was for content parity and day and date support of the Call of Duty franchise on Nintendo platforms. So in terms of when that starts, that we do not know. If it's going to start with Black Ops 7 or if it's going to start sometime past that, we don't know. But when that first one hits, it is going to be the content parity, exact same game across the board on the Nintendo Switch 2, and likely even some versions of prior games on the Nintendo Switch. And it's going to start a clock of 10 years minimum that support will come to Nintendo's platform. So nothing really too much to be worried about, but rather, if you're a Call of Duty fan, we just have to wait a little bit longer to get some official confirmation, and in terms of learning what game is going to kick off the Nintendo support as part of this partnership. Okay. If you are somebody who has a battery issue right now, you feel like on your Switch 2, where maybe you're playing your console and the battery acts like it's going to be fully depleted, but you can continue to play it past that because it's not going down or shutting off past zero. There's actually some specific steps that Nintendo has outlined, and I'm just going to hit the high points here. I'll have this article linked in the description down below, but this may be worth doing if you do feel like things are weird right now with your battery. Battery charge indicator on percentage displays incorrectly on Nintendo Switch 2. Steps for when the battery amount displayed on the actual remaining battery use don't match. For example, you are able to continue using your Nintendo Switch console for a few hours even though the battery indicator displays the battery is almost depleted. This is what you kind of need before you start your console: the AC adapter and access to the internet. And the steps that you want to take is confirm that you are using an adequately powerful AC adapter to charge your console. The Nintendo Switch 2 AC adapter with that specific model can be used to charge Nintendo Switch 2 when plugged into the console directly. Due to power output differences, it cannot be used to charge the Nintendo Switch 2 when docked. Then you have confirm the console has the latest update, power off the console, then you power and hold, or press and hold rather, the volume up and volume down buttons simultaneously, and press the power button to turn the system on. Keep holding down the volume buttons until the menu for recovery mode appears, and then you navigate to the menu that should reset the battery level meter. Power off the console again by pressing and holding that power button until it turns off, and power the console back on and monitor the situation. If it is not resolved, they have navigate to the recovery mode menu. Should be enough to reset the battery level meter. If you follow the steps above multiple times and the battery continues to display the remaining battery levels incorrectly, the console will need to be sent in for service. So this is kind of the official statement from Nintendo on this issue. They also do, basically outline that the expected life should be approximately 2.5 to 6.5 hours I'm hearing games like even Cyberpunk 2077 in official tests have hit right about 2.5 hours on average. So if you're getting like way under that, or at least according to your battery indicator, you are getting stuff that's way under that, you know, like it's saying that it's about to die and it's at 10%, but you really have quite a bit of session left to go, you may just try those steps. It doesn't seem like it would be anything that would harm the console, and that's what Nintendo's telling you to do if you feel like something's off from your battery performance on the Switch 2, which it's clearly not as good as the Switch OLED or V2 Switch. If you were used to that, we are kind of back to the Switch 1 level of battery performance. If you remember the OG console and what it ran like on a game like Breath of the Wild, it was dying after 2.5 hours as well, if not a little bit under that. So that's kind of where we're at right now for this original model of Switch 2. Okay, from here we have a load time comparison on how a game is installed. It actually does impact the load time slightly, not day and night here, which is actually a good thing. But you have from Nintendo, essentially internal memory, as you should expect, is always first. The 1 terabyte Lexar card was the other one that was tested next. That popped up just after, and the game card, which is actually slightly slower performance than these other two. Again, not day and night, 16.6 seconds, 19.78, but 24.75 for game cards. So you are actually loading into things legitimately slower if you were on a game card than your internal memory by quite a bit. For physical collectors like myself out there, that's worth knowing. And the SD card option, micro SD card express, it's kind of right in the middle of the road. So I would say if you want the absolute quickest, you know, obviously install any game to your internal storage. But if you want something that's, you know, reasonable and still like pretty close, but obviously just a little bit slower, the SD card. And you know what, the game card for me, even though it takes a little bit longer to boot into games like Mario Kart World, as you can see here, I still like the option of not having all the storage taken up of the console, and it's just on that game card. So it does come with a little bit of a downside on the loading time, but then at the same time, your internal freed up storage remains higher if you do have more game cards that are not game key cards, mind you, because those will have to go on the internal or SD card, obviously. Okay, now we got some Joy-Con drift talk going on already for this new console. This user that is in the calibrate menu is reporting that basically out of the box, his Joy-Con was not working right. And this might not be this type of issue where it's drift that is, you know, noticeable over time, like we saw really plague the Nintendo Switch 1. Rather, this could just be a factory defect. The joystick could just be broken out of the box. But they do have that he called Nintendo and sent it in for repair. And there's some talk kind of going on that called Nintendo customer service, and with no questions, they said they'll repair it. They did not ask for additional information. So if you're getting any weird problems with your controller or console, obviously it's not fun to have to send it in to them and wait for them to repair it. But Nintendo does seem to be handling that stuff promptly and just no additional cost. There is also some discoveries being made online. Shout out to Nintendo Prime here, just basically sharing this find that it does look like, unfortunately, the fear has been realized that Switch 2 is using the same mechanism for their Switch 2 sticks as Switch 1. There are adjustments and they aren't identical. They made certain aspects smaller, which may or may not help with the wear and tear caused the Joy-Con drift. So, basically, there's the main piece. It's not like drastically different. Nintendo has said in official statements that they, from the ground up, redesigned the Switch 2 Joy-Cons, and they are, you know, not worried about Joy-Con drift, let's say, or they're not anticipating any problems. Obviously, you wouldn't be. You wouldn't want to put something out that you were anticipating problems with. But we don't know until the long term on if this is going to be an issue that hits Nintendo hard this generation again or not. We are not talking about Hall effect sticks here. They are indeed still very similar to how they manufactured the original ones, but there are adjustments. So it's possible that Joy-Con drift is an issue yet again. It's also possible that it's not near as widespread or doesn't start popping up at that type of level, but only time will tell on this. Okay, this next piece of information really found interesting because Nintendo, it seems to have maybe had Mario Kart World have a dynamic difficulty system, and we'll unpack what this means here, but you have this article from Nintendo Soup where it says Mario Kart World appears to have a dynamic difficulty system. Multiple users have claimed Mario Kart World has a dynamic difficulty system after performing some tests on the game. According to user comments on various forums and social media, CPU players are extremely punishing in 150cc Knockout Tour races. Many who have played Knockout Tour in 150cc said that they were front-running, leading in first place most of the time, and in Knockout Tour rallies, but the CPU players were very powerful as they would drive at faster speeds and often got powerful items. such as triple red shells in second place. Because of this, they were unable to recover back to their spot after getting hit by blue shells or multiple red shells. This is extremely problematic for Knockout Tour players, as you need to place first at every checkpoint, not just at the end of the rally, in order to get 3 stars for the rally. Okay, a few users later found out that anecdotally, the game has a dynamic difficulty system. It seems that the game adjusts the difficulty of the CPU players depending on how often the human player drifts. The more you drift, the faster the CPU players become and the better items they get. Nintendo Soup tested this hypothesis in several 150 Knockout Tour rallies in Mario Kart World. We tried playing the rallies with drifting and without drifting. Generally speaking, the results align with what users have reported. It was much easier to get 3 stars without drifting than with drifting. We noticed that CPU players weren't using powerful items often when we didn't drift at all. We can also confirm that anecdotally, CPU players in the 150cc Knockout Tour are tougher than CPU players in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. Okay, so the difficulty one on this, if this is indeed true and it checks out, obviously we need like data mining and stuff to see that it is 100% confirmed, but legitimately that would be crazy if the amount of drifting and more advanced tricks that you do, the CPUs are actually responding and getting faster and better items due to that. Now, this isn't confirmed. This is a lot of anecdotal reports, but nonetheless, a lot of people are seeming to back up the same thought process, and that would be a very interesting turn if that is how Nintendo programmed the difficulty for Mario Kart World, where, yeah, the more advanced players, even if you have the CPU difficulty on normal or whatever the case, they're going to get better items and potentially play better if you are also utilizing more advanced features like drift mechanics. And, you know, the more you drift, the faster you go. In turn, the CPUs kind of ramp up their performance as well. So it'd be interesting to see if we find out the for sure answer about that in the future, but nonetheless, I found it fascinating, and I would love to hear from you guys in the comments if you've tested anything like that and if you feel like that is indeed the case. Okay, next up we have Fortnite Switch versus Switch 2 video shows you just how big of a difference that there is. And this is kind of cool because it does really show you really the fact that we are playing in a new console generation here. Just to kind of highlight the video quickly of what you were looking at before on the Switch 1 compared to what is running, even though this is the same game, it is a true next generation upgrade. As you can see it there yourself, it just looks like a completely different map and terrain, and the level of detail is clearly day and night better on the Switch 2 version. So, you know, obviously, while, you know, some games are not going to look this noticeable, this is just Fortnite getting to a modern, acceptable frame rate and texture level of detail on the Switch 2 version, and it's just kind of cool to see legitimately how much of an upgrade it is in this particular game, and just how much extra horsepower we're really running with on the Nintendo Switch 2 in comparisons to the Switch 1, with the multiple different aspects that are outlined here and different texture details you can see in Fortnite. Okay, very last thing to close this out. Just this quick little straightforward tweet from Mr. Miyamoto. This is Miyamoto. For production reasons, we are changing the release date of the live action film of The Legend of Zelda to May 7th, 2027. It will be some weeks later than that, the release timing that we originally announced, and we will take the extra time to make the film as good as it can be. Thank you for your patience. So just some official updates, production timing, whatever the case. Nintendo got a little bit behind schedule. Maybe they just like that May time slot better for a release window, who knows, but May 7th, 2027 is now the date. And I will be curious if at an upcoming direct, like over the summer, or maybe even the year at, you know, the end of the year or early next year, we maybe get that look at what the casting choices are for this, because I think that they want to get that out there early enough that it doesn't totally leak online. So we'll have to kind of stay tuned for that and see if we actually find out who is playing our beloved Zelda characters in this live action movie that hopefully Nintendo delivers on in all fronts in terms of the quality of the story, the acting, the whole bit. So let me know in the comments down below what you make of all the different stories today, and how are you enjoying the Switch 2 now that it's been out for a little bit, if you have picked one up. If you haven't picked one up, when are you planning on getting one, if you are at all? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn your notification bell, and with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.